But it is indeed the quote of the day from the case. The head of a major New York law firm's defending his deal with the Trump administration. The president had threatened the firm Paul Weiss for working with his political and legal adversaries. His executive order suspended Paul Weiss lawyers from getting security clearance, even entering federal buildings. The White House revoked the order last week after the firm agreed to a series of terms, which included doing $40 million worth of free work for charity. Paul Weiss chairman Brad Karp wrote a letter to his firm explaining why he made the deal. He said, the executive order could easily have destroyed our firm. It brought the full weight of the government down on our firm, our people, and our clients. Evan Falchuk is the board member for the group Lawyers Defending American Democracy, with me from Boston. In the world of Hobson's choice, he had the CEO with these wider issues had no option other than to hold his nose and do the deal, don't you think?
Well, he of course had a choice, and he made one. But lawyers swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law. And so we have an obligation and a duty to fight back against these kinds of illegal and unconstitutional actions by the government. I'm not saying it's easy to make those decisions. People's lives are affected. But if lawyers aren't willing to fight when the government is putting illegal and unconstitutional action against them, when are we going to fight? You know, when is it right to fight? What will be the right line to draw? And I think this was one of those opportunities.
I guess whatever the seriousness, and it is exceptionally serious, I suppose some would, Brad Kraft would say, oh, that's easy for you to say in your comfy seat, or say of me in the as I pontificate in the television studio. I'm not employing several thousand people. The clients will evaporate quicker than Scotch mist in summer. I don't know what we would have expected him to do.
Well, I mean, for starters, there is an oath that lawyers take, and you have to fight against illegal and unconstitutional actions by the government. And all lawyers know that the order targeting Paul Weiss was illegal. But at the same time, Paul Weiss is going to take a hit from this anyway. We're talking about them here. They're going to lose clients. They're probably going to lose partners. It reminds me of, what Churchill said to Neville Chamberlain, where you had a choice between dishonor and war. You chose dishonor, and you'll have war.
So the fascinating part, though, which having looked at this, is that other law firms were weak as water. They didn't rush to defense. That I'm surprised that the magic circle, didn't all come together and say, we stand together. Because if you did have Skadden Arps, Sherman Sterling, Slaughter-Mayer, all the big firms saying together as one, stop it, or we'll sue you collectively, that would have been powerful.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very disappointing. I'm surprised too. But the fact that these other firms didn't do what Paul Weiss wanted isn't an excuse for Paul Weiss to do what it did. Someone has to draw a line. This is why we created Lawyers Defending American Democracy, is to give lawyers a voice and a place where you could say, you have to live up to your oath. You have to live up to your oath and fight for what we believe in.
Turn briefly to the matter of this appeal. I mean, it's the line of the day, isn't it? It's the quote of the day: the Nazis were treated better. I'm guessing what the learned judge means is, of course, there was a process, there was an appeal process that did not exist here. How do you see this moving, this case?
Right. Well, I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that cases like this, or the Paul Weiss story, are business as usual, politics as usual. It's really not. It's something else. The Constitution requires that the government give people due process, a chance to prove that what the government is saying is true. And in this case, they just rounded up a bunch of people. They said they're all part of a gang, and they shipped them out of the country to a prison in El Salvador. There's no finding that these people actually belong to that gang, and they might, but there's a process, and the administration has decided it doesn't want to follow the Constitution.
So on a wider issue, if I may, and you may be, I trained as a lawyer, and
Yep.
One thing that still fascinates me is reading these reports of the judges and the appeals, somewhere in every description, appointed by Obama, appointed by Bush, appointed by... I can't think... I mean, certainly not in the English judicial system. No one would ever know who appointed a member of the Supreme Court or any of the benches of the High Court or Courts of Appeal. And certainly no one would ever suggest that it was sort of a politically motivated decision other than a philosophical jurisprudential of a conservative or liberal nature.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Richard. And I think I mean, no disrespect to the media, but it's a problem that the press reports judges in that way because in a time when everything is politicized, it makes it seem as if judges who are trying to follow the law and uphold their own oaths and who take their jobs very seriously are acting with some political animus, which is just generally not the case.
Mm.
And I think it's a disservice to the public when people act in that way. And you're absolutely right to raise it. And I'm glad you are.
But it's relevant in the sense of those judges are following their judicial philosophy of conservatism
Absolutely.
or liberalism. And that, I think, is different in the United States to other countries where it would be based purely on judicial capabilities.
Well, I think there's some truth to that, and that's the nature of our system. But I think the reality is the judges, by and
Yeah.
large, are trying to do their best to interpret the law.
Yeah.
And in these cases, these aren't hard cases. It's not a hard case to decide that a group of people can be mass deported without due process. That's not a hard case. That's not a political case.
I'm grateful for you, sir. Thank you. We'll talk more on this in the future. Thank you.